Hey everybody, it's me, Steve Schnee, and welcome to the first episode of Comically Speaking in 4 or 5 years. As many of you know, I was born with visual problems and hearing problems, and no amount of surgeries and anything has been able to help. So, ironically enough, the things my hobbies have been audio, music, which I don't hear all the frequencies. And the other thing is visual. And the thing that I used to love when I was a kid, now I didn't buy them a lot, but I used to love to get comic books. And I'm referring to DC and Marvel, because I would just, you open the pages and there's the bright yellows and the bright blues and the reds and stuff. And it was so enchanting for me. And both music and comic books served as just great escapes. For those of you who have dealt with any type of handicap, any level, you'll know that you're going to deal with the people who make fun of you and mock you and all that kind of stuff. So I would use these things to sort of escape that. But comic books, I'd buy the occasional Superman, Spider-Man, and then some other maybe kind of weird or odd superhero type thing. But it really wasn't until maybe mid 70s or so, that in my neighborhood there was this guy named David. I'm not going to mention his last name, but I remember one day talking to him, and he said that he had bought a comic book at the store. It was a horror comic book, and it freaked him out so much that he went and he threw it in the bushes in his yard. And so I actually just begged him to, retrieve it. And it was like kind of high up in this tall hedge. And it was all black and white, thrown together into this magazine called Weird. I think I picked up that whole concept of being weird based on just the title of that comic book. Anyway, I remember the back cover of that comic book had this one guy, mocking the guy who had died. He was standing on the guy's grave. And I think that this guy had something to do with his death. And, you're dead and I get to take all your money or whatever. And then the ground sort of opened up and he sort of swallowed him. So he went down up to his head in the dirt, and then the tombstone came down and crushed his skull. I know that sounds odd or whatever. I'm still looking for that comic book or that comic story that was probably in another comic book. So if anybody finds that familiar, please let me know what story that is. Anyway, that started my whole wow, horror comic books. This is awesome. And but I gave up on comic books because being a kid and you get other interests, and my interest went into music. Now, I don't make a lot of money. I know that a lot of people go, oh my God, he must be rich. I could have been rich, but I have all this. But so I have to put my attention on one or the other. Comic books, which are very expensive, and CDs, which are very expensive. And sometimes over the last couple decades, I've gone to comic books for a little while, then went back to music. And there was a period about 5-6 years ago that I just dived fully into comic books. This is when I was living in Sacramento. And my two favorite comic shops were World's Best Comics, which was a good 15-20 minute drive, I think. But Dave Downey, the proprietor of the place, was a cool guy, and he knew exactly what I wanted. A guy named Robert who worked there. In fact, you can see a video on my channel visiting that shop. And then there was another one called A1 Comics in Sacramento, which was just around the corner from me. And it was just huge and had just tons of stuff. So I'd spent a lot of time and, unfortunately, money. And then I finally had to decide, I can't focus on making videos and things like that on CDs if I'm focusing on comic books. So I started a comic book series called Comically Speaking, and it failed miserably. Duh. Hello. I mean, that's not a surprise. But it was because I was so excited about it, and I was learning as I was going along. I was not coming from, I'm not an expert in music, but I know a lot more about music than I do comic books. So I was coming at it from maybe a novice point of view and learning as I went along. So I'd be talking to the guys at the comic book shops. How come there's 17 different new Batman comics every week? I mean, that's pushing it. Spider-Man. There's, Superior Spider-Man, Inferior Spider-Man, Sad and Lonely Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, things like this. And so I wanted to learn about it. I wanted to learn it all. And I was just buying new comic books and just diving in, reading these stories. It was getting to the point where I was getting a backlog of stuff. I'd be buying Miracle Man, and I'd read up to issue 3, and they were already putting out like issue 16 or whatever. And eventually COVID hit, and that wiped out my enthusiasm for anything. And I had to sort of climb back up on my horse, but I couldn't take the other horse with me. It's still alive. It's still living on a ranch somewhere in Utah. I mean, it's not literally a horse, so if anybody's starting to think that I got rid of a horse, no, I didn't. But I continued with the music. And music has been a struggle to be able to afford everything. And, when I make videos, I put a lot of time, a lot of energy, and I make sure that I have everything that I need. And if I'm missing one CD, I go out and buy it, all that kind of stuff. But comic books, it was just a new thing for me. And I don't collect, I don't go, you know what, I'm really into Captain America, so I'm going to buy all Captain America. Or I'm really into Superman. I mean, those are probably, Superman and Captain America are my 2 favorite comic book characters because they do things for the right reasons. They do things to help people, to save people. It's not because they're inner turmoil and stuff like that. But I mean, comics nowadays kind of make every superhero have some kind of inner turmoil. But growing up, Superman had his issues, but he was doing things for the right reasons. And that's why I was digging that kind of character. I dig positivity in everything that I get involved with, whether it's music, comic books, tap dancing, jazz hands. And I don't know, maybe I should do that again with a little bit more excitement, a little bit more positivity. But what happens is I had to give up comic books because I just couldn't afford to do both. What has happened is I've constantly been thinking about comic books. Now, I did, when I moved to this upstairs unit here, I just, there's no room to put my comic books. So I've had them down in the garage. And I've been thinking about going through and finding all the stuff that I haven't read yet, and then just bringing that upstairs. Now today, thanks to some very kind people who bought CDs off of me, I was able to afford some comic books today. So I'm going to show those to you at the end of this video. Or maybe I might make a second video. In fact, yeah, that's what I'll do. I'll make a second video so you don't have to sit through this and another 10 minutes of me showing you. But it's not going to be 10 minutes. It's going to be like 5. But I'm going to eventually, bring that stuff back. But something terribly tragic happened about 2 years ago. I've never, ever talked about this outside of small circle of friends. Is when, I was in the downstairs unit and going to move up to the upstairs unit. So I moved a bunch of stuff to the garage, including those box of comics. Now, those boxes of comics are fine. What I did is like all the special ones, all the ones that people had gifted me, the ones that were pop culture related, because that's the kind of comic books I buy. I don't just buy superhero stuff. I'll buy Partridge Family comic books. I'll buy Happy Days comic books, Welcome Back, Kotter, things like this. And there have been special gifts that wonderful friends have given me. And so I put everything in this black bag. And I sort of hid it in the corner. And, I made sure that, okay, now once I get the rest of everything upstairs, I'll be able to grab that bag, take it upstairs, and I'll be able to keep those safe. And, because they're very important to me. sentimentally because people gave them to me, and also because they're amazing comic books. Well, we had a company come down and rip out the floors from downstairs and put new flooring in. Well, no matter how much I hid that bag, once they were gone, that bag was gone with them. Now, did they take it? Or did they leave the garage door open while they were inside and some of the neighborhood kids came and saw it and they, pilfered through the garage trying to find anything that they could? But that bag of my most favorite, most special, and also most expensive comic books was stolen. And it was devastating, absolutely devastating. And so it's been very difficult for me to dive back into it because every time I thought about comic books, I couldn't even tell these kind people that gifted me this stuff because it's so upsetting. Because, I not only lost these treasured possessions, I let these people down. And that bag had only been there for a day or two in the thing. I just couldn't bring it up with me with all the other stuff. And, it's pretty darn devastating. So that's why it's been difficult for me to get back into comic books. COVID sort of sucked the life out of everything for a little while. I was fine. I never got COVID, to my knowledge. In fact, since I wore a mask all the time, I never even got colds for years. But yeah, things like that are very important, And, like I said, I'm the kind of guy that, I'm disappointed that I lost these, but I'm also disappointed that these gifts that these very kind people gave to me, or that I purchased with my allowance or whatever, were gone. So, but now I'm not abandoning music, not even in the slightest. But I'm going to get back into the comic book thing a little bit. Not necessarily go out and buy a bunch of stuff because I just can't afford it. I cannot afford to buy comic books. But I've got those boxes downstairs that are still things that I haven't gone through. And like I said, I'm not the kind of guy that just goes out and buys all the new stuff. Now, I bought some new stuff that I'm going to show you in a separate video. But I love to show these weird old, Christian faith comic books, or these army comic books, or these, I love to collect comic books with dinosaurs on the cover or sharks on the cover. And if some of that stuff survived from being stolen, then I'm going to be showing that. And my love for comic books is very much like my love for music. I love tons of it. I'm going to invest my money into things that make me happy, as everybody should. And so you're probably going to see some videos on my channel. I'm not going to be offended if you don't watch my Comically Speaking videos. They're not going to be in depth like this video is, because I'm talking to you. I'm sharing thoughts, feelings, reasons. Too much exposition, like some recent comic books. But I wanted to share that with you, and just know that if you're interested, I'm going to have Comically Speaking videos to go alongside Steve Schnee Goes Outside, CD Junkie, interviews, and whatever else I do. And people have to realize that this is my channel. I'm not saying that in a mean way, but I'm no longer interested in impressing people or doing anything like that. I just want to talk about what I love, and hopefully it connects with people, and hopefully people say, you know what, I'm going to check that out. I'm going to go online and I'm going to buy a copy of that, or I'm going to walk into a CD store or a comic book store. That's all I want. I want people to get excited about stuff. I see too much negativity out there. What's your 10 least favorite rock bands, or these are my 72 least favorite Beatles songs, things like that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not here to get clicks. I'm just here to talk to you, have fun, make myself feel better. This is the stuff that makes me feel really good, whether it be CDs, comic books, chatting with musicians, whatever. It's just, to me, it's the magic of it all. And I hope that you still continue watching my music videos if you're not interested in comic book videos. But I hope that you maybe check some of those out. They're not going to be exposition like this. They're going to be me showing you not tons of stuff. The next video will be me showing you about 10 or 15 things. But other ones will just be maybe 3 minutes where I just show you something that's really cool, and then that's it. Or I might just make a bunch of shorts. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do it regardless of what your high school principal thinks. I don't know why I said high school principal, but I appreciate you watching this video. Remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, ring that bell for future notifications. And until the next time, this has been Comically Speaking with me.